Good day all. As we're continuing on our lesson, whereby we look at the gaseous exchange. So now we are going to continue and look at how gaseous exchange actually occurs. So here, as we are looking at the functions of the gaseous exchange, one thing that you are all going to realize is that when it comes to the gaseous exchange, right, we have this structure which we call the alveoli. But before we look at the alveoli, the most important thing that we have to know is that the main function of the gaseous exchange in a human being, it is to take in oxygen. And where does that oxygen come from? It comes from the air. Why from the air? Because if we're looking wherever there's air, this is where we have our atmosphere. This is where we have the land. We've got the plants. I think we're all aware of that. We've got the trees. And all those things actually produce what? Oxygen. So when it comes now to us human beings, we actually require the oxygen that comes from the plants, that comes from the tree. So when we breathe in that particular oxygen, it is known as inhalation. So inhalation is a process whereby we breathe in air from the atmosphere. So when it comes to the air that we breathe in, it is actually rich in terms of the oxygen. So that air that we breathe in, it is going to be absorbed into your lungs and then into what we call your alveoli. So if you're looking at this diagram that is presented here, this is your alveoli. So what happens, we've got an arrow over there which shows us the airflow. You have got the internal one which is facing down, which shows you that that is inhalation, whereby the air is going to be breathed in. And also the arrow is also shown pointing outside. So when it is pointing outside, that process is known as exhalation. So what happens now is that during inhalation, the air is going to be absorbed into your lungs, right? But when the air get to the lungs, it get absorbed into your what? Into your alveoli. So when it comes to the oxygen, once it is absorbed by the alveoli, then that blood is now going to be then that oxygen, I'm sorry, that has been received, it is then going to be transported to the blood. Then from there, it is going to be sent to all the body cells that we actually have as human beings. So once the blood cells or once the blood is received the oxygen, same thing that is going to happen is that the oxygen that won't be used, it is going to be found as carbon dioxide in the body cells, and then that carbon dioxide, it is going to leave the body cells to the alveoli, then to the outside, which is through the process which is called exhalation. So in simpler ways, we're simply saying each and every individual actually breathe in oxygen. So when we are breathing in oxygen, that process is called inhalation. So during inhalation, your oxygen or the air that has got rich oxygen, it is going to be absorbed into your alveoli. So when it is absorbed into the alveoli, it goes to the blood. And then once that oxygen reaches the blood, it is then going to be transported to all the body cells that we actually have. And also at the same time, the oxygen that won't be used, it is going to leave your body cells as carbon dioxide. That's why if we're looking at our diagram for alveoli there, you are going to see that we've got arrows which are pointing inwards, and you've got your oxygen there being absorbed into your capillaries. That process is called inhalation, whereby the blood gets absorbed, then from there it transported to all the body cells, and the body cells on the other side are going to now produce what? The carbon dioxide. So one thing that we all have to know is that when it comes to the air that we actually breathe in, or the air that actually enters your alveoli, you are going to realize that the inhalation or the air that enters your alveoli after you have actually inhaled that particular air, it is going to have a high concentration of oxygen compared to the amount of oxygen that you initially found in the what? In the blood or surrounding capillaries. Someone might be asking themselves, okay, so why do I have so much concentration of oxygen, or why do I have so much oxygen reaching my alveoli? Remember, guys, we're simply saying internally all of us don't have a high level of oxygen, right? But where do we find the oxygen? We find the oxygen in the atmosphere. That's why you can never compare the amount of oxygen that you find in the atmosphere and the amount of oxygen that you're going to find in the blood, because all those ones, they can never have the same amount of oxygen. Another thing is that based on the different environmental conditions. So in order for our alveoli to have what? To receive oxygen, or in order for our blood cells to receive oxygen, what are we supposed to do first? We have to breathe in, which is inhalation. So when you're breathing in, that is the only time you allow your body to receive oxygen. Otherwise, if there's no process of breathing in, there's no way your body is going to receive oxygen. And then another thing is that when we are breathing in, right, this is when your body is going to receive more amount or more oxygen compared to the carbon dioxide. That's why now, if you're looking at the amount of carbon dioxide, you find more carbon dioxide where in your tissues, in your blood, or in your capillaries. Why? Because after you have absorbed oxygen into your body, you've got the amount of oxygen that won't be used again, which is your carbon dioxide, which is the air that you're going to breathe out. So that is the difference on why we have a high level of concentration of oxygen when we're breathing in, and then we also have got a higher level of carbon dioxide when we're what? Breathing out. It is because we don't really need to use carbon dioxide in our bodies. That's why a large amount of carbon dioxide is actually released out of the system through the process of exhalation. So, one thing that you all have to know is how the process of inhalation actually happens. So, if we're looking at inhalation, the first things first, guys, you should actually be able to analyze the what? The diagram, or how the diagrams look like. So, if you're looking at this particular diagram, we call this a process of inhalation. So, how do you identify that this is inhalation? It is because the diaphragm is pulled downwards. But if you're looking at this one, you are also going to see that if you're now looking at your diaphragm, right, it's more relaxed. So that is one way which can actually help you to identify if it is inhalation or if it is exhalation. And then another thing that we can simply use there, if you're looking at your arrows, right, your arrows there, they show that they are going inside. And another thing is that they are also being what? Absorbed into your what? Into your capillaries. But if you're looking at your exhalation again, you are going to see that the arrows, right, are now facing outwards, and they're also facing the opposite sides to your what? To your cells, which is another example, or it's another hint that can actually help you to identify, is this inhalation or is this a process of exhalation? And it is very important for you to remember how the process of inhalation happens and how the process of exhalation happens. So if you're at home, you can also look for a small bottle. You look for a wrapping paper, which is a wrapping paper that we use to wrap our salads with. You also look for a straw. You look for a small balloon, and then you look up on a textbook, and then you're going to find an experiment which is going to help you understanding the process of inhalation and exhalation. So if you don't have those materials at home, don't worry, because this is a practical that you are here to do at school so that it can give you a better understanding on how the process of inhalation and how the process of exhalation actually occurs. So, what happens is that during inhalation, we've already explained before that inhalation is when you breathe in, right? Which simply means that the air is going to move into your lungs, right? Before it can even get absorbed into your alveoli. But the important thing is that when we are breathing in, right, you're going to identify that your diaphragm muscles are going to contract, right? And then from there, they also first down. That's why if you're looking at the diagram, we're saying the diaphragm is actually pulled down. So as the diaphragm pulls down, it simply shows you that this is your what? Your inhalation. But one thing that you're going to identify is that if you breathe in, And I believe we can all breathe in at the same time. So if you do this, one thing that you're going to identify, guys, is that your internal costal muscles, right, that you find in between your ribs, they are going to cause your rib cage to actually move upwards, and then from there it pushes outward. So what happens is that when you breathe in, right, you are going to see one thing is that your chest is going to be pushed outward, if I may put it like that. That is what happens when you're what? You're breathing in. So as you're breathing in, one thing that is going to happen is that the air pressure in the lung, it is going to what? To decrease. But the volume in the chest, or the pressure in the chest, is the one that is going to what? To increase. So what happens is that we've already discussed this before, that as you are breathing in, guys, you are going to find out that you are going to have more pressure that comes from the atmosphere than the pressure that you're going to find in the lungs. Reason being, the lungs do not have excessive amount of oxygen as compared to the atmosphere. So one thing that you have to remember is that every time, guys, you breathe in, your intercostal muscles, they are going to contract. Once your intercostal muscles contract, what they simply do is that they push the rib cage outwards, then from there the rib cage gets pushed outwards. So when you're breathing in, you're going to see that the first thing, your chest is going to start by rising before it actually bulges out, or before it actually pushes out. That is the process of inhalation, and it is very important for each and every one of you to remember the drawings, how they appear, and also please be able to remember how the process is like. And then we look at our exhalation, right? So when it comes to the exhalation, one thing is that when you are exhaling, right, you're not really putting pressure on your diaphragm and so forth, right? But everything just has to relax, or everything is just going to automatically relax, because there's no pressure that is being exerted to your what? To your lungs and so forth. So as you're breathing out, we are going to realize that your diaphragm is going to relax, as it is shown there on the diagram. Your diaphragm actually relaxes, and it also moves out upwards, because if you remember, if you look at the previous diagram, we said the diaphragm is pulled down, but now if you're looking at this one, you can see a bit of a difference. The diaphragm is now moved where? Upwards. So when it comes to the external intercostal muscles, they're also going to what? To relax, and your rib cage is going to move down, and it also moves inwards. Why is it moving inwards? It is because there's that sort of relaxation. So when you're exhaling, one thing that you have to remember is that you are breathing out. So as you're breathing out, what are you breathing out? It is carbon dioxide. So where do you find a lot of carbon dioxide? You're going to find it in the lungs. That's why you are seeing now the air pressure in the lungs is going to increase relative to the air pressure, or the air that is forced out. So, or the basically to the outside pressure. Why are we seeing outside pressure? Because on the outside, we don't have much carbon dioxide as compared to oxygen, but internally, guys, we have got more oxygen, which you are, so you've got more carbon dioxide, which you are going to find in your body cells. That's why the air pressure in the lungs, it is going to increase. So one thing that you have to know is that when it comes to the alveoli, right, this is where you are going to have what? More oxygen, if I may put it like that. This is when you're going to have more oxygen being present. But if you're breathing out, this is where you're going to have more carbon dioxide, which is going to be available in your what? In your alveoli. That's why when it comes to the exhalation, it is known as a passive process. What does passive mean? Passive means you get what? To relax. So one thing about the alveoli surface, we also know it as a what? As an external, or this is a place where external gaseous exchange occurs. But again, if you're looking at your blood, if you're looking at your tissues, this is where the internal gaseous exchange occurs. Why are we saying the alveoli? This is where your external gaseous exchange occurs. Because, guys, when we are breathing in, right, you're breathing in oxygen. Where is the oxygen coming from? It is coming from the external side, which is your atmosphere. But if you're looking at your blood, you're looking at your capillaries, you're looking at your tissues, right? We're saying this is where your internal gaseous exchange is going to occur. Why? Because this is where you're going to have your carbon dioxide being what? Being released to the outside or to the atmosphere. But where does it come from? It comes from it comes from the tissues, or it comes from the blood that you're going to find in your lungs. That's why during exhalation, you are going to have more pressure or more air pressure being exerted if you're comparing to the outside air pressure. So this is where our lesson is going to stop. We're going to meet again, guys, and we continue with this process because it is very important for you to understand it bit by bit on what we're doing instead of me just feeding you all the information up until you end up getting lost. So for today, please, guys, go through the gaseous exchange, go through the knots, know the importance of the alveoli, know how the gaseous exchange happens in the alveoli. Please know the process of inhalation and exhalation, and it will be also ideal or advisable for you guys to also try and do the experiment on your own at home. Until we meet again in our next lesson. Bye.